care what badge you flash, Agent. You're not welcome here. Take your coffee and go.
Ma'am, I'm just here for a drink. I'm not causing a problem.
You heard me. Out of my cafe now.
Understood. Have a good day.
March 15th, 2024. Marcus Washington had been quietly serving coffee for 3 years. The man who once hunted serial killers for the FBI. That's exactly why he recognized the micro-expressions when Karen Whitfield started screaming. 24 customers watched her demand his removal from Magnolia Cafe. Security cameras captured every second. Marcus stayed calm, left without argument, just like he'd trained himself to do. What happened when he got home and studied that footage changed everything. The way she touched her left ear when lying. The specific phrase she used, "people like you." The calculated rage that felt rehearsed. Marcus had seen it all before, 15 years ago, in witness statements about a murdered civil rights lawyer. The viral video made Karen Whitfield famous for all the wrong reasons, but it also made her visible to the one man who'd been hunting her ghost. The night Marcus Washington realized his biggest failure was serving him coffee every morning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus's hands trembled as he rewound the security footage for the 7th time. 3 a.m., and sleep was impossible. The laptop screen cast harsh shadows across his modest apartment above the coffee shop, a far cry from the FBI field office where he'd once analyzed crime scenes. Karen Whitfield's face filled the frame again. That moment when she'd stepped closer, invading his space at the Magnolia Cafe counter. The micro-expression lasted exactly 1.2 seconds. He'd timed it. The slight dilation of pupils before the calculated outburst. The way her voice pitched higher when she said, "People like you don't belong in decent establishments." Marcus paused the video. There. The left ear touch. Index finger, brief contact, immediately after the lie about him making other customers uncomfortable. 15 years of retirement hadn't dulled his eye for deception markers. His phone buzzed. Text from his daughter Keisha in Atlanta. "Dad, I saw the video. Are you okay? This is insane. Everyone's talking about it." The footage had exploded across social media. Hashtag racist Karen was trending. Strangers were defending him online, calling Karen a disgusting excuse for a human being. But Marcus barely noticed the support. His mind was locked 15 years in the past. David Chen, civil rights attorney, found beaten to death in his Pine Ridge office, case files scattered, nothing stolen. The witnesses all described the same woman, white, mid-40s, well-dressed, with a distinctive verbal tic. People like him think they can change everything overnight. That's what she'd said to Chen's secretary the day before the murder. Marcus pulled up the Chen case file on his laptop. After retirement, he'd kept digital copies of everything, against regulations, but some cases never let you go. 3 witness statements mentioned the ear-touching gesture, the calculated anger, the same entitled fury that Karen had displayed today. He opened a second window, splitting the screen between the cafe footage and Chen's crime scene photos. The lawyer's office, blood spatter patterns suggesting a crime of passion that had been staged to look like a robbery gone wrong. Marcus had profiled the killer as someone with intimate knowledge of Chen's work, someone who felt personally threatened by his civil rights cases. Karen Whitfield, real estate developer. In 2009, Chen had been investigating discriminatory housing practices in Pine Ridge's affluent Oakwood subdivision, the same subdivision where Karen now lived in a $2 million mansion. Marcus's coffee had gone cold hours ago. He pushed away from the desk, pacing the small apartment. 15 years of what-ifs crashed over him, the case that broke him, not just because he'd failed to solve it, but because of what came after. The Rodney Williams investigation, profiling gone wrong, an innocent black teenager dead because Marcus had been too consumed with Chen's murder to think clearly. 2 lives lost, 1 killer walking free. The laptop chimed with another notification. The cafe video had hit 500,000 views. Comments flooded in, most supportive, some vile. But one caught his attention, posted just minutes ago. Whitfield Realtor, this man was clearly unstable and threatening. "I did what any responsible citizen would do. Some people love playing the victim." Marcus screenshot the comment. Karen was doubling down, even as her reputation imploded. Narcissistic personality disorder markers, inability to accept responsibility, projection of blame, grandiose self-image despite public humiliation, all consistent with his original profile of Chen's killer. He needed more. Behavioral analysis required pattern recognition, and one incident wasn't enough. no matter how perfectly it matched his cold case. Marcus opened his encrypted files, searching for every detail about Karen Whitfield he'd quietly gathered over the years. She'd moved to Pine Ridge in 2008, 1 year before Chen's murder. Bought her first investment property through a shell company. Started Whitfield Development in 2010, just months after the Chen investigation went cold. Her business had thrived on exclusivity, luxury developments that somehow never seemed to attract diverse buyers. Marcus pulled up property records. Chen had been investigating 3 specific cases of housing discrimination in 2009. 2 involved companies that were later absorbed by Whitfield Development. The third was a rental property that Karen had personally managed. His phone buzzed again, this time an unknown number. "You should be more careful about the company you keep, Mr. Washington. Small towns have long memories." Marcus stared at the message. No name, but the phrasing was unmistakable. The same formal tone Karen had used earlier, the veiled threat wrapped in politeness. She was watching him now, just as he was watching her. He'd spent 3 years hiding in plain sight, serving coffee to the woman who might have killed David Chen. But now the game had changed. The viral video hadn't just exposed her racism, it had forced both of them into the open. Marcus saved everything to an encrypted drive. Tomorrow, he'd start building a case. Real evidence this time, not just behavioral analysis. Because if Karen Whitfield was David Chen's killer, she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd let the only man who'd ever come close to catching her see exactly who she really was. And Marcus Washington never forgot a face. Ready to dive deeper? Hit that follow button, because tomorrow's chapter reveals the shocking connection between Karen and Marcus that goes back even further than he realizes. Trust me, you don't want to miss this revelation. The first rays of dawn crept through Marcus's apartment windows, finding him still hunched over the laptop. His neck ached from hours of maintaining the same position, but sleep had become impossible once the connection started forming. The encrypted drive hummed softly, backing up 15 years of carefully preserved evidence that the FBI had long since filed away. Marcus closed the laptop and walked to his small kitchen, muscle memory guiding him through the ritual of making coffee. Ethiopian beans, medium roast, ground fresh. The familiar motions should have been soothing, but his hands still carried a tremor from the adrenaline surge. 3 years of peaceful mornings shattered by a recognition that made his blood run cold. Through his window, Pine Ridge was waking up. Mrs. Henderson walked her arthritic beagle past the coffee shop same time every morning. The postal truck rumbled down Main Street, normal people living normal lives, unaware that a killer might have been walking among them for over a decade. His phone displayed 17 missed calls from Keisha. Marcus knew his daughter well enough to recognize the panic behind her persistence. She'd been protective of him since his forced retirement, checking in weekly, always worried he was isolating himself too much in this small Georgia town. The viral video would only amplify her concerns. He dialed her number, knowing she'd be awake despite the early hour. She answered before the first ring finished. "Dad? Jesus, I've been calling all night. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart." The lie came automatically. Marcus had spent 3 years perfecting the art of seeming fine when talking to Keisha. She carried enough guilt about his retirement without knowing the full truth about why he'd really left the bureau. "That woman is absolutely vile. The things she said to you." Keisha's voice carried the familiar mixture of love and helpless anger that Marcus had heard since childhood whenever she encountered injustice. "I've been reading the comments. People are furious. Someone even found her business address." Marcus felt a chill. Internet justice was unpredictable, often more destructive than helpful. If Karen truly was David Chen's killer, public harassment might drive her underground or prompt her to destroy evidence. "Don't get involved, Keisha. Please. It's just one ignorant woman having a bad day." "Dad, this isn't about one incident. This is about systemic." "I know what it's about." Marcus kept his voice gentle but firm. "But I need you to trust me on this. Let it play out naturally." A long pause. Keisha had inherited his analytical mind, and he could practically hear her processing the subtext in his tone. "There's something you're not telling me." Marcus stared out at the peaceful street, remembering another morning 15 years ago when normalcy had been shattered by a crime scene photo sliding across his desk. David Chen's broken body, surrounded by scattered legal files advocating for fair housing practices that had apparently gotten him killed. "Just be careful what you post online, and don't come down here right now." Give it a few weeks to settle. Marcus Washington, if you think I'm going to let some racist... Keisha. The sharp tone made her go quiet. Marcus rarely used that voice with her, but some conversations required the authority of a man who'd spent 25 years dealing with dangerous people. I mean it. Stay away from Pine Ridge right now. Another pause, longer this time. When Keisha spoke again, her voice was smaller, uncertain. You're scaring me, Dad. The admission hit him like a physical blow. Marcus closed his eyes, seeing his daughter's face at 16, when the FBI had called to tell her that her father was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation into the Rodney Williams shooting. The same fear in her voice now that had been there then, fear of losing the only parent she had left. I'm sorry. I just need some time to process yesterday. It brought up memories. That much was true, even if incomplete. Keisha's breathing evened out slightly. Okay, but promise me you'll call if you need anything. And Dad, I'm proud of you for how you handled yourself in that video. You kept your dignity when she was trying to take it away. After ending the call, Marcus sat in the quiet apartment surrounded by reminders of his smaller life. Photos of Keisha's graduation from law school, following in her father's footsteps toward justice, even if from a different angle. His modest furniture chosen for comfort rather than impression. Books on philosophy and gardening, subjects that had helped fill the void left by investigative work. 3 years ago, this apartment had felt like sanctuary, a place to heal from the trauma of Rodney Williams' death, to build something positive with the coffee shop downstairs. He'd served Karen Whitfield dozens of times, seeing her only as another customer who preferred her latte extra hot and never tipped well. Now the same space felt exposed, vulnerable. If Karen was watching him, she knew exactly where he lived, where he worked, how isolated he'd become. Marcus realized with crystalline clarity what he stood to lose, not just his own safety, but Keisha's. She was a civil rights attorney in Atlanta, visible and vocal about social justice. If Karen had killed once to protect her interests, she might not hesitate to strike at what Marcus loved most. The coffee shop below would open in 2 hours. Marcus would smile at customers, steam milk, pretend yesterday had been an unfortunate misunderstanding rather than the moment a cold case had walked back into his life. But first, he needed to make another call. Marcus scrolled through his contacts until he found a number he hadn't dialed in over 2 years. Detective Ray Santos, Atlanta PD Cold Case Division. They'd worked together on a human trafficking ring back in 2018, before Marcus had fully retreated into his quiet Pine Ridge existence. Santos was one of the few cops who understood the weight of unfinished business. The phone rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. Santos, this better be good. It's not even 6 a.m. Ray, it's Marcus Washington. A pause. Marcus? Holy shit, man. I saw that video last night. You okay? I need a favor. The kind that doesn't go through official channels. The silence stretched longer this time. Marcus could hear Santos moving around, probably stepping away from his sleeping wife. When he spoke again, his voice was more alert. What kind of favor? Property records, financial background, maybe some old witness interviews from 2009. The David Chen murder in Pine Ridge. Jesus, Marcus, that case has been cold longer than some of my rookies have been alive. What's this about? Marcus stood and walked to his window, watching the town wake up below. How could he explain the certainty that had crystallized in his mind? The behavioral markers, the timeline, the bone-deep recognition of a predator he'd been hunting half his life ago? The woman in the video, Karen Whitfield. I think she's connected. Connected? How? I think she killed Chen. Another long silence. Marcus heard Santos blow out a breath. Based on what? A coffee shop confrontation? Based on 15 years of watching her live in this town. Based on witness descriptions that match her perfectly. Based on... Marcus stopped himself. He was pushing too hard, too fast. Santos needed evidence, not intuition. Look, just run her name against the Chen files. See what comes up. If I'm wrong, I'll back off. And if you're right... Before Marcus could answer, his laptop chimed with an email notification. The sound made him freeze. He'd been so focused on the call that he hadn't noticed the new message sitting in his inbox marked urgent. The sender name made his stomach drop. d.chen.law@memorial.org. Marcus, you still there? I'll call you back. Marcus ended the call and stared at the screen. The David Chen Memorial Foundation email address. He'd set up a digital memorial years ago, hoping to keep the case in the public eye. The account was supposed to be inactive except for automated anniversary notifications. With trembling fingers, Marcus opened the email. Mr. Washington, I understand you've been asking questions. David Chen was a good man who died because he wouldn't stay quiet. You should consider the benefits of silence. Some stones are better left unturned. A concerned citizen. The timestamp showed the message had been sent 20 minutes ago, while Marcus was on the phone with Keisha. While he was making plans to contact Santos, someone had been watching, waiting, and now they knew he was digging into the past. Marcus's training kicked in despite his retirement. He screenshotted the email, checked the routing headers, saved everything to his encrypted drive. But even as he worked, a deeper realization was settling into his bones like winter cold. This wasn't just about Karen Whitfield anymore. The email had been sent from a sophisticated proxy server, the kind of digital sleight of hand that required real technical knowledge. Either Karen had help, or there were other players in this game that Marcus had never identified. His phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time, Marcus answered immediately. What do you want? Now that wasn't very polite, was it? The voice was electronically distorted, but the cadence was unmistakably female. You've had a peaceful few years, haven't you? Nice little coffee shop, quiet life. Sweet daughter making such a name for herself in Atlanta civil rights law. Marcus's blood turned to ice. If you touch her, nobody wants to touch anyone, Marcus. We just want you to remember that some cases stay cold for good reasons. David Chen thought he could change the world. Look how that worked out for him. The line went dead. Marcus stood frozen in his kitchen, the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to the dial tone. 3 years of careful rebuilding, of finding peace in small-town rhythms and simple customer interactions, had just crumbled into dust. But worse than his own exposure was the sick certainty now flooding through him. These people, whoever they were, knew about Keisha. They'd done their research. They understood exactly what buttons to push to keep him quiet. 15 years ago, Marcus had failed to catch David Chen's killer. The case had consumed him, cost him his perspective, led directly to the Rodney Williams tragedy that ended his career. He'd told himself that walking away was the right choice, that some battles weren't worth the collateral damage. Now those same killers were threatening his daughter. Marcus looked around his peaceful apartment one last time, memorizing the sanctuary he was about to leave behind. Because there was no going back now. The past had reached into his present with bloody fingers, and this time, he wasn't walking away. This time, someone was going to pay. Marcus stood motionless in his kitchen for what felt like hours, though the clock showed only 5 minutes had passed since the line went dead. The phone remained pressed to his ear, its plastic surface growing warm against his skin. Through the window, Pine Ridge continued its peaceful morning routine, oblivious to the fact that 15 years of buried secrets had just clawed their way to the surface. Walk away, the rational part of his mind whispered. Pack up the coffee shop, move somewhere new, disappear like you did 3 years ago. But Keisha's voice echoed in his memory. I'm proud of you, Dad. She believed in him, in the man who'd once been the Bureau's best profiler, the man who'd lost himself in the David Chen case and destroyed an innocent teenager's life in the process. Marcus set the phone down with deliberate care and opened his laptop. If they were watching him, let them watch. If they thought mentioning Keisha would make him crawl back into his hole, they'd miscalculated badly. He pulled up Detective Santos's contact information again, but hesitated before dialing. Getting Ray involved meant exposing him to whatever network had just threatened a federal agent's family. Marcus had already cost too many people too much. Instead, he opened his encrypted files and began documenting everything. The threatening call, the timeline, the behavioral markers he'd identified in Karen Whitfield. If something happened to him, there needed to be a trail for someone else to follow. 20 minutes later, a soft knock interrupted his work. Marcus froze. The coffee shop didn't open for another hour, and delivery trucks never came to the residential entrance. The knocking came again, polite but insistent. Marcus closed the laptop and moved to the window, angling himself to see the street below without being visible from outside. A Pine Ridge police cruiser sat at the curb, engine running. They work fast, Marcus thought. Less than an hour after his conversation with whoever was protecting Karen, and local law enforcement was already at his door. He walked slowly to the apartment entrance, his mind cycling through possibilities. They couldn't arrest him for receiving threatening calls, unless they planned to claim he'd made them himself. Small-town cops had limited resources for digital forensics, but someone with serious technical skills was clearly involved. Mr. Washington? It's Officer Bradley from Pine Ridge PD. Just want to have a quick conversation. Marcus knew Bradley by sight. Mid-30s, decent reputation, not one of the good old boy cops who might have personal relationships with someone like Karen Whitfield, which made his presence either very good or very bad news. Marcus opened the door but kept the chain engaged. Little early for a social call, isn't it? Bradley looked uncomfortable, his usual easy manner replaced by professional tension. Sir, we've received some concerning reports about social media activity related to yesterday's incident, threats being made against local residents. I wanted to make sure you're aware of the situation. What kind of threats? People posting Karen Whitfield's home address, business information, talking about driving down from Atlanta to handle things personally. Her husband called it in around 5 a.m., said they're getting harassing phone calls. Marcus studied Bradley's face, searching for tells. The officer seemed genuinely concerned, not like someone delivering a scripted warning, but the timing was too convenient to be coincidental. And you think I'm involved? How exactly? Bradley shifted his weight. Look, Mr. Washington, everyone knows you used to be FBI. People see that video, they get angry, maybe they think you'd want assistance. We just need to make sure nobody takes matters into their own hands. The careful phrasing triggered Marcus's analytical instincts. Bradley wasn't here to arrest him or deliver threats. He was fishing for information about Marcus's intentions. Someone had made the smart play of using legitimate police procedures to gauge how the former profiler planned to respond. Officer Bradley, I appreciate your concern, but I haven't asked for assistance from anyone. I just want to move past yesterday and get back to running my business. Bradley nodded, but something flickered in his expression. Disappointment? Relief? That's good to hear. Just, if you do receive any concerning communications, you'll let us know, right? Pine Ridge is a peaceful town. We'd like to keep it that way. After Bradley left, Marcus remained at the window watching the cruiser disappear down Main Street. The message had been delivered with professional courtesy, but the meaning was clear: stay quiet, don't make waves, let sleeping dogs lie. Marcus returned to his laptop but found his hands shaking too badly to type effectively. 3 years of careful emotional control were cracking under the pressure of resurrection. Not just the Chen case, but the guilt over Rodney Williams, the fear of failing again, the terror that his past mistakes might now cost Keisha her life. He closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe, using techniques learned in Bureau stress management training that felt like relics from another lifetime. When he opened them again, his phone was buzzing with a text from an unknown number. Coffee shop opens in 30 minutes. Hope you're planning to serve your usual customers with a smile. Some people depend on routine. Marcus stared at the text message until the words blurred together. Some people depend on routine. The casual menace in those words made his chest tighten. They weren't just watching. They were dictating his every move, turning his own business into a stage for their psychological theater. He set the phone down and walked to his bathroom mirror. The man staring back looked like a stranger. Gray stubble, bloodshot eyes, the hollow expression of someone who'd glimpsed the abyss he thought he'd escaped. 3 years of peaceful mornings, of simple customer interactions and quiet evenings, had been an illusion. The past had never really let him go. 6 minutes now. Marcus splashed cold water on his face and tried to summon the mask he'd need to wear downstairs. But as he reached for his razor, another memory surfaced, one he'd spent years trying to bury. Rodney Williams, 17 years old, backing away from Marcus's drawn weapon with his hands raised, tears streaming down his face. Please, sir, I didn't do nothing. I was just walking home. Marcus had been so deep in the Chen case obsession by then, so convinced that every young black man in Pine Ridge might be connected to the lawyer's murder, that he'd seen threat where there was only terror. The shot had been reflex when Rodney stumbled backward off a curb. One bullet, center mass, ending a life that had barely begun. The official investigation cleared Marcus of wrongdoing. Rodney had been carrying a cell phone that looked like a weapon in poor lighting. Marcus had identified himself as FBI. The shooting fell within use of force guidelines. But Marcus knew the truth. He'd killed an innocent teenager because he'd lost perspective, because the Chen case had consumed his judgment and turned him into exactly the kind of profiler he'd once hunted. 2 minutes. Marcus set down the razor without using it. His hands were shaking again, and the last thing he needed was to cut himself before facing whatever performance they expected downstairs. He dressed mechanically, jeans, flannel shirt, the coffee shop apron that had become a costume for his smaller life. But as he reached for his keys, the apartment phone rang. The landline he kept mostly for business emergencies. its shrill tone cutting through the morning quiet like an accusation. "Hello? Marcus." The voice was different this time. Older, male, no electronic distortion. "We need to talk. I'm listening, not over the phone. Pine Ridge Cemetery, David Chen's grave, 9 p.m. tonight. Come alone, tell nobody, bring nothing electronic." Marcus felt his chest constrict. Why there? A bitter laugh. Because some conversations require proper context. You spent 15 years wondering who killed David. Tonight, you're going to learn why he had to die. And more importantly, why you're going to help us make sure it stays buried. The line went dead just as Marcus heard footsteps on the street below. Through his window, he watched the first morning customers gathering outside the coffee shop. Mrs. Henderson, who came for her daily decaf, Jim Morales, who grabbed black coffee before his construction crew started work, Sarah Beth, who nursed a caramel macchiato while grading papers from her third-grade class. Regular people living regular lives, depending on routine just like the text had promised. Marcus had served them hundreds of times, listening to their small problems, celebrating their minor victories. They trusted him to provide consistency in their mornings, never knowing that their friendly barista had killed a teenager and failed to catch a murderer. 8 minutes. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time it was Keisha calling, her name lighting up the screen like a lifeline. His finger hovered over the answer button, desperate to hear her voice, to pretend for just a moment that his daughter was safe and his past couldn't reach her. But answering meant lying again. It meant performing normalcy while killers circled closer, meant protecting her through deception rather than action. Marcus had been lying to Keisha for 3 years about why he'd really left the bureau, letting her believe the official story about seeking a quieter life rather than the truth about Rodney Williams. He let the call go to voicemail and immediately felt like a coward. But cowardice had kept Keisha safe for 3 years. Maybe it could keep her safe a little longer. 15 minutes. Marcus gathered his keys and wallet, checking his reflection one final time. The man in the mirror looked broken, haunted, nothing like the confident federal agent he'd once been, but perhaps that was appropriate. He was about to descend into a performance that would either save his daughter's life or cost him his own. Because Marcus understood now what he should have realized 15 years ago, David Chen hadn't died randomly. Someone with power, with connections, with the ability to make federal agents disappear, had orchestrated that murder. And they'd been watching Marcus ever since, waiting to see if he'd become a threat. Tonight, in a graveyard where Chen's bones had been rotting for 15 years, Marcus would finally learn the truth he'd failed to uncover as an FBI profiler. He just hoped he'd live long enough to do something about it. Marcus descended the stairs to his coffee shop, each step feeling like a descent into performance art. The familiar ritual of unlocking the front door, switching on the espresso machine, and arranging pastries in the display case, actions that had brought him peace for 3 years, now felt like choreographed deception. The morning customers filtered in with their usual easy chatter, unaware that their barista was being watched by killers. Mrs. Henderson complained about her arthritis while ordering decaf. Jim Morales joked about his crew's latest construction mishap. Sarah Beth graded spelling tests between sips of her caramel macchiato. Marcus served them all with mechanical precision, his trained smile hiding the chaos beneath. But every movement felt calculated for an invisible audience. When he dropped exact change, when he laughed at Jim's stories, when he asked Sarah Beth about her students, all of it performed for watchers who knew exactly how much pressure to apply. "You seem distracted today," Mrs. Henderson observed, her sharp eyes studying his face. "Everything all right?" "Just tired," Marcus replied, refilling her cup. "Long night." The lie came easily, like all the others he'd told since leaving the bureau. But Mrs. Henderson had been a school principal for 40 years before retiring to Pine Ridge. She knew when someone was hiding something. "Well, don't let those internet trolls get to you," she said quietly. "That video is already old news. People move on faster than you think." Marcus nodded, but he was thinking about the cemetery meeting, about David Chen's bones waiting in the darkness. Some things never moved on. Some secrets just burrowed deeper until someone forced them into the light. The morning rush ended around 10, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the weight of invisible surveillance. He tried to focus on inventory, on cleaning equipment, on the mindless tasks that had once brought him peace. But every few minutes, he found himself checking his phone for threats, for updates, for any sign that Keisha was safe. At 11:30, the door chimed again. Marcus looked up expecting another regular customer and felt his world tilt sideways. Detective Ray Santos walked in, his expression carefully neutral. Behind him came a woman Marcus didn't recognize, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of polished authority that screamed federal law enforcement. "Marcus," Santos said, approaching the counter, "we need to talk." Marcus's hands continued wiping down the espresso machine, muscle memory keeping him moving while his mind raced. "About what?" The woman stepped forward, her smile as sharp as broken glass. "Mr. Washington, I'm Special Agent Diana Cross, FBI Internal Affairs. I understand you've been having some interesting conversations about old cases." The bottom dropped out of Marcus's stomach. Internal Affairs only got involved when federal agents violated policy or when they needed to be silenced permanently. He'd assumed his watchers were local players, people with regional influence. He'd never considered that the conspiracy might reach into the Bureau itself. "I retired 3 years ago," Marcus said carefully. "I don't discuss cases anymore." "That's funny," Cross said, pulling out her phone, "because we have recordings of you discussing the David Chen murder with Detective Santos just yesterday, along with some very creative theories about local residents." Santos wouldn't meet Marcus's eyes. The betrayal hit harder than any physical blow. Ray had been feeding information directly to the people Marcus was investigating. Every conversation, every shared suspicion, every moment of trust had been a setup. "Ray," Marcus's voice came out rougher than intended. "How long?" "Marcus, you don't understand. How long have you been working for them?" Cross stepped between them, her presence commanding the space like a predator claiming territory. "Detective Santos has been keeping us informed about your mental state since you moved to Pine Ridge. The Bureau has legitimate concerns about former agents who become fixated on unsolved cases." Marcus set down the cleaning rag with deliberate control. 3 years of friendship, of shared coffee and conversation, of believing he'd found someone who understood the weight of unsolved cases, all of it orchestrated surveillance. "What do you want?" Marcus asked. "We want you to remember that David Chen's case was officially closed due to lack of evidence. We want you to stop harassing local residents with conspiracy theories. And we want you to understand that former federal agents who make trouble have a tendency to disappear." The threat was delivered with bureaucratic politeness, but Marcus heard the steel underneath. These weren't street thugs making empty promises. They had the resources and authority to make him vanish without a trace. "The meeting tonight," Marcus said. "That was you." Cross smiled, and for the first time, her mask slipped enough to reveal something cold and satisfied underneath. "Mr. Washington, there is no meeting tonight. David Chen died 15 years ago because he couldn't leave well enough alone. You killed Rodney Williams because you couldn't let go of ghosts. How many more people have to suffer because you refuse to accept that some cases can't be solved?" The words hit like physical blows, each one precisely aimed at his deepest guilts. But in Cross's arrogance, in her certainty that she'd broken him completely, Marcus heard something that changed everything. She just admitted that Chen's murder could be solved, if someone was willing to pay the price. Marcus stood frozen behind the counter, the revelation settling into his bones like ice water. The coffee shop that had been his sanctuary for 3 years suddenly felt like a trap, its familiar warmth replaced by the sterile atmosphere of an interrogation room. "You made a mistake," Marcus said quietly. Cross raised an eyebrow, her composure unshaken. "Excuse me? You said Chen died because he couldn't leave well enough alone, not that he died randomly, not that his murder was unsolved. You confirmed someone killed him to stop his investigation." Santos shifted uncomfortably, finally meeting Marcus's eyes. "Marcus, don't do this. Please, just walk away." The plea in his former friend's voice revealed everything Marcus needed to know. Ray wasn't a willing collaborator. He was another victim, trapped in the same web that had been slowly tightening around Marcus since the video went viral. "What do they have on you, Ray?" Marcus asked. "Your pension? Your daughter's college fund? Or something worse?" Cross's smile never wavered, but Marcus caught the micro-expression that flashed across her features, surprised that he'd read the situation so accurately. His profiling instincts, dormant for 3 years, were awakening like a muscle remembering its purpose. "Mr. Washington, you're constructing elaborate fantasies to avoid facing simple truths. You're a disgraced former agent who killed an innocent teenager and now sees conspiracies everywhere. The kindest thing we can do is help you find professional treatment." But Marcus was studying her now with the analytical intensity that had once made him one of the Bureau's most effective profilers. Cross carried herself with absolute authority, but there were tells. The slight tension in her jaw when she mentioned Rodney Williams, the way her fingers tapped against her phone when she delivered threats. She knew details about his case that shouldn't be in any internal affairs file. You weren't investigating me, Marcus realized. You were protecting Karen. The tapping stopped. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place with brutal clarity. The video going viral wasn't unexpected. It was planned. You needed me exposed, public, so any action against me would look justified. Karen's little performance was theater. That's enough, Cross said, her professional mask slipping another degree. But something went wrong. I didn't react the way you expected. Instead of hiding, I started investigating. And when I connected Karen to the Chen murder, you had to accelerate the timeline. Santos took a step back, his face pale. Marcus, stop talking, please. The cemetery meeting was supposed to be my execution. Make the former FBI agent disappear while chasing ghosts, another tragedy of PTSD and survivor's guilt. But now you're here instead, which means you're desperate. Cross's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and for the first time, Marcus saw real fear flicker across her features. We're done here, she said, turning toward the door. Agent Cross. Marcus's voice carried the authority of his former rank, the tone that had once commanded federal task forces. When you report back to your handlers, tell them they made another mistake. They let me see the surveillance photo. Cross froze, her hand on the door handle. The angle was wrong for a standard security camera. Too high, too clear. That wasn't traffic cam footage. It was taken from the building across the street, David Chen's law office, the same building where he was murdered. Marcus walked around the counter, closing the distance between them with predatory calm. 3 years of suppressed instincts were flooding back. The ability to read fear, to apply psychological pressure, to corner prey that thought it was the hunter. Someone's been watching that spot for 15 years, waiting to see if anyone would connect the pieces. And when I finally did, when I recognized Karen's mannerisms from the witness descriptions, they panicked. Cross spun around, her composure completely shattered. You don't understand what you're interfering with. This goes deeper than one murder, deeper than your small-town guilt complex. There are national security implications. Try again, Marcus cut her off. Chen was investigating Pine Ridge development contracts, real estate fraud, money laundering through rural properties. Karen Whitfield wasn't just the killer, she was the bagman. Santos sank into a chair, his face gray. Jesus Christ, Marcus. They'll kill us both. No, Marcus said, his voice steady for the first time in days. They'll kill you. I'm already dead. I just haven't figured out the when and how yet. But you still have a choice. Cross was backing toward the door now, her authority replaced by naked desperation. This conversation never happened. You never figured out anything. Chen's case stays closed, Karen stays protected, and everyone goes back to their normal lives. Except Rodney Williams, Marcus said quietly. He doesn't get to go back to normal. He doesn't get to go anywhere. The words hung in the coffee shop's suddenly suffocating air. Marcus felt the weight of 15 years of failure, 3 years of hiding, and 1 moment of terrible clarity converging into something he could no longer avoid. The point of no return wasn't a destination, it was a recognition. He'd been running from the truth since the day he killed Rodney Williams, pretending his exile was penance instead of cowardice. But some ghosts demanded justice, not just guilt, and Marcus Washington was done running from the living. Marcus moved to the coffee shop's front door and turned the deadbolt with deliberate finality. The click echoed through the sudden silence like a gavel falling. Nobody leaves until we finish this, he said, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years in federal law enforcement. Ray, step away from Cross. Now. Santos hesitated, torn between old loyalty and new fear. Marcus, you're making this worse for everyone. It can't get worse. Marcus turned back to Cross, who was frantically typing on her phone. Put it down, Agent Cross. Your backup isn't coming. She looked up sharply. What? The local police are compromised. We've established that. FBI response time to Pine Ridge is 43 minutes minimum. And something tells me you didn't file official paperwork for this visit. Marcus studied her face, reading the micro-expressions like a map. This is off books, isn't it? Just you and your handlers, trying to clean up a mess before it reaches people who might ask uncomfortable questions. Cross's finger hovered over her phone screen. In that hesitation, Marcus saw confirmation of everything he'd suspected. Rodney Williams was 17 years old, Marcus continued, moving closer. Honor student, planning to study engineering at Georgia Tech. I put 3 bullets in his chest because I was so convinced he was connected to David Chen's murder that I lost all perspective. Santos flinched, but Marcus kept talking, his voice steady despite the pain each word caused. But I was right about the connection, wasn't I? Just wrong about Rodney's role. He wasn't the killer, he was a witness. Someone who'd seen something, maybe heard something. Another loose end that needed tying up. Stop, Cross whispered. You used me as the weapon. Fed me just enough information to point me in his direction, knowing my judgment was compromised by the Chen case. Knowing I'd gotten too close to the truth and needed to be discredited. The phone slipped from Cross's hands, clattering to the floor. Marcus saw the exact moment when her professional mask finally cracked completely, revealing the desperation underneath. You have no idea what you're destroying, she said. Pine Ridge is a hub for intelligence operations. Money moves through here to fund black sites, off-books operations, things that keep this country safe. Chen was going to expose it all over some small-town real estate deals. Santos made a choking sound. Intelligence operations? You told me it was just money laundering. Shut up, Ray, Cross snapped, then immediately realized her mistake. She just confirmed Santos's complicity while revealing the scope of what they were protecting. Marcus felt something cold and final settle in his chest. How many people have you killed to protect it? How many Rodney Williams? How many David Chens? The greater good requires difficult choices. The greater good. Marcus's laugh held no humor. You sound exactly like the corrupt agents I used to hunt. Same justifications, same righteous arrogance. He pulled out his own phone, holding it where Cross could see the screen. A video recording, red dot blinking, timestamp showing the last 10 minutes. I've been streaming this conversation to 3 different cloud servers since you walked in, Marcus said quietly. Facial recognition, voice analysis, full confession. It's already uploaded beyond your ability to retrieve. Cross went white. You're bluffing. Check your intelligence files, Agent Cross. I didn't retire from the Bureau. I was recruited into a task force that investigates federal corruption. Deep cover assignment, 3 years of building credibility in Pine Ridge, waiting for the local network to expose itself. The lie came out with such calm authority that even Santos looked convinced. Marcus had learned long ago that the best deceptions contained enough truth to feel real. And the truth was that he'd spent 3 years learning every detail of Pine Ridge's power structure, mapping connections he thought were just small-town politics. The coffee shop owner identity, the exile story, even killing Rodney Williams, all part of establishing my cover. You think the Bureau would really let the agent who came closest to solving the Chen case just retire quietly? Cross was shaking now, the careful composure of 15 years completely shattered. That's impossible. We monitored, we had oversight. You had Ray feeding you information about a broken ex-agent making conspiracy theories. What you actually had was a federal task force using Pine Ridge as a honeypot, waiting for you to incriminate yourselves completely. Marcus turned to Santos, whose face had gone ashen. Ray, you have 30 seconds to decide which side of this you want to be on when the arrest teams arrive. I never meant, Santos started, then stopped, looking at Cross with dawning horror. You told me Marcus was having a breakdown. You said I was helping prevent another suicide. Cross was backing toward the door again, but Marcus had positioned himself between her and escape. Karen Whitfield killed David Chen on your orders, Marcus stated. You've been running money through Pine Ridge development projects for 15 years, and when I got close to exposing it, you manipulated me into killing the one witness who could have brought down the entire operation. Prove it, Cross whispered. Marcus smiled, and for the first time in 3 years it felt genuine. Agent Cross, I just did. The arrest teams arrived 18 minutes later, not FBI, but Treasury agents from the Financial Crimes Division, their jurisdiction clean and uncompromised. Marcus watched through the coffee shop windows as Cross was led away in handcuffs, her federal authority stripped as efficiently as removing a badge. Santos went separately, cooperating witness status already negotiated through his phone calls to Internal Affairs. The real task force commander, Assistant Director Patricia Reeves, arrived as the last patrol car pulled away. She was younger than Marcus expected, with the kind of sharp competence that reminded him why he'd once loved federal work. Hell of a performance in there, she said, settling into the booth by the window, though I'm not sure which was more impressive, the interrogation or the improvisation, Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee with hands that barely trembled. How much of it was real? The task force? The 3-year operation? None of it. Reeves accepted the cup with a nod of thanks, but the recording was real, the confessions were real, and Cross's network is finished. So I'm still just a disgraced ex-agent who killed an innocent kid. Marcus. Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Rodney Williams wasn't innocent. The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus sat down heavily, the coffee shop spinning around him. He was Cross's asset, Reeves continued quietly. 17 years old, recruited through family debt, running messages between Karen and the money handlers. Chen was getting close to the truth, so they activated Rodney to feed him false information. Marcus stared at his hands, remembering blood, remembering the light going out of a teenager's eyes. He was still 17. He was still a criminal, and when Chen realized he'd been compromised, Rodney panicked and tried to run. You didn't kill an innocent witness, Marcus. You killed a Kyo conspirator who was reaching for a gun. The absolution felt like poison. Marcus had spent 3 years learning to live with unbearable guilt, and now they were asking him to simply let it go. Why didn't you tell me before? Because guilt made you credible. A broken agent seeking redemption was the perfect cover story. If you'd known the truth about Rodney, you never would have sold the performance. Marcus looked around the coffee shop, his sanctuary, his penance, his carefully constructed exile from the world that had demanded too much. 3 years of brewing coffee for neighbors who'd become friends, 3 years of believing himself a monster, 3 years of running from a truth that had been manipulated from the beginning. What happens now? Cross's network had tentacles in 4 states, connections to cartels, terrorist financing, human trafficking. We'll spend the next 5 years following leads. Karen Whitfield is already talking. Seems she kept detailed records as insurance. Reeves leaned forward. We could use someone who understands how these people think. The offer hung between them like smoke from the espresso machine. Marcus could go back, could reclaim his badge and his purpose, could hunt monsters again instead of hiding from them. But the cost of that world was written in every line of Cross's face, in every choice that prioritized mission over humanity. I killed a 17-year-old, Marcus said quietly. Justified or not, criminal or not, I'm the one who pulled the trigger. That doesn't go away because the paperwork was complicated. Reeves nodded slowly. Then, what will you do? Marcus looked out the window at Pine Ridge's main street, at the community that had sheltered him without knowing who he really was. Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop was walking her ancient beagle. Tom from the hardware store was hosing down the sidewalk. Normal people living normal lives, untouched by the shadows that had consumed his world. I'll make coffee, he said finally. I'll listen to Mrs. Chen when she comes in every Tuesday and orders a green tea because this is the only place in town that knows how her husband liked it prepared. I'll sponsor Little League teams and fix broken windows and try to remember what it feels like to build things instead of tear them down. Reeves stood, leaving a business card on the table. If you change your mind, director. Marcus's voice stopped her at the door. David Chen. His family? His widow moved to California years ago, but she visits his grave every year on the anniversary. October 15th, Pine Ridge Cemetery, 2 o'clock. After Reeves left, Marcus sat alone in the coffee shop as afternoon sunlight painted the walls gold. Tomorrow would bring reporters, curiosity seekers, people wanting to hear about the FBI agent who solved a cold case while serving lattes. The quiet life he built was over. But for the first time in 15 years, the weight in his chest felt like something other than guilt. David Chen had justice, Rodney Williams had justice, and Marcus Washington had something he'd forgotten was possible, the chance to live with truth instead of running from it. He began preparing for the evening rush, muscle memory and hard-earned peace carrying him forward into whatever came next.